let's take an example for a contract that includes a significant financing component. Let's read this case study together. Company A enters into a contract with a customer to manufacture and supply a new machine. Control over the completed machine will pass to the customer in 2 years, which is the point in time at which Company A performance obligation will be satisfied. So the company will deliver the machine to the customer after 2 years. The contract contains 2 payment options. So there are 2 options and the customer is going to select the best option for him. Number 1, payment of $5 million in 2 years, which it obtain control over the machine. So this means that the customer is going to receive the machine after 2 years and they pay for the price of this machine after 2 years. And the second option is the customer is allowed to pay today $4 million at the first day of the contract, I mean at the inception of the contract. So let's understand the second option together. Second option means that the customer is going to pay today $4 million. But when the product is going to be delivered to the customer, the product will be delivered to the customer after 2 years. So effectively, the customer is paying in advance for these products. Okay, so the customer decides to take the option of payment of $4 million at the inception of the contract. So the customer decided to select the option number 2 in the payment. Okay, let's analyze the case. The question that we need to answer right now is, does the entity has a significant financing component? I can say easily yes. And why? Because actually the cash selling price that the customer might pay today is $4 million. But if the customer is going to pay after 2 years, he's going to pay $5 million. And the customer at the same time, if he paid today $4 million, he's going to receive the machine after 2 years. And effectively, because the customer paying the company today, so the company is borrowing fund from the customer. Because the customer paying today and the product will be delivered after 2 years. So the company effectively is taking loan or is borrowing a fund from the customer. Now comes to the second question. This $4 million is paying, the customer is going to pay today. We need to determine the discount rate that we are going to use in order to do the accounting entries. The discount rate can be two things. The first one is the interest rate implicit in the contract. This interest rate is a calculation of a rate that make all of the future cash flow equal to the cash price today. This is in the case that the customer is going to pay in arrears. But because the customer is going to pay in advance, so the company is going to borrow from the customer. So the company should use a discount rate equal to the incremental borrowing rate. So the company can say that, okay, if I'm going to the bank and they get a new loan, so the bank is giving me the loan on 4%, 5%, for example. So this will be incremental borrowing rate. So this will be used in a contract where the customer is going to pay in advance. And in this case, the company determined the incremental borrowing rate to be 6%. And this is the rate that I'm going to use to do all of the accounting entries in this case. Okay. Right now, let's start by doing the accounting entries. And I'm going to split these accounting entries into 3 phases. Phase number 1 at the inception of the contract. Phase number 2 at the end of the first year. And phase number 3 is the end of the second year. Let's do the first entry that at the inception of the contract. Now, the customer is going to pay the company today. Okay, so the customer is going to pay cash. So the company should recognize cash received. So this cash that the company is going to receive from the customer, how much is it? The customer is going to pay $4 million. So this will be the cash that the customer is going to pay. And at the same time, the company received cash for something the company didn't deliver yet. Okay, clear? Now the company is going to deliver after 2 years. And the company received the cash today, so this cash will be considered as a liability. So the company should recognize a contract liability by the same value, which is $4 million. So now the company received the cash and didn't deliver the product yet. So the company is going to consider this $4 million as a contract liability. At the end of the first year, because the company effectively borrowing from the customer, so the company should recognize financing cost because the company is effectively borrowing from the customer. So the company should recognize financing cost. So how much the beginning balance or how much is the balance of the liability so far at the end of the first year? It's $4 million. but the company should recognize financing cost over this 4 million. So the company say here, this is 4 million. I'm going to multiply it by 6% in order to recognize the financing cost of the first year. So this will be the financing cost as an expense in the P&L. So this will be called finance cost. And effectively, this finance cost should increase the contract liability of the customer, of the contract. So now the contract liability will be increased. So now the contract liability will be increased by the same value, which is 240. So the balance now, the balance of the contract liability is 4 million plus 240. So it is 4,240,000. Now, at the end of the second year, the company is going to do the same entry again to recognize finance cost for the second year. Okay, this finance cost should be calculated on the ending balance of the first year. Okay, so we are going to repeat again the same entry, debit financing cost, but how should we calculate the financing cost? It will be based on the ending balance of the first year. So the ending balance is 4,240,000 times the 6%. This is the interest rate or the discount rate that we are using to recognize the financing cost. So the financing cost of the second year is 254,400. This is the financing cost of the second year. Okay. And the credit should be also to the contract liability with the same value. Now, the question here is, how much is the balance of the contract liability at end of the second year? Simply, it will be ending balance of the first year plus the financing cost that we recognize for the second year. This will result in 4,494,000. This is the balance of the contract liability at the end of the second year. Okay. Now, let's recognize the revenue. After 2 years, what happened? The company is going to deliver the product to the customer. As long as the customer is going to take the control of the product after 2 years, and now we are after 2 years, so we need to recognize revenue as of today. So the fact here is we didn't recognize revenue at the inception of the contract, because actually the company didn't deliver the control of this product at the inception of the contract. The company is going to deliver the product and the machine to the customer after 2 years. And because we are now at the end of the second year, and the customer received the machine and they already took a control of this machine, so we need to recognize revenue today. Now, the question here is, how much revenue should we recognize today? Now, in the end of the second year, you performed your liability. You performed your obligation. You delivered the machine to the customer. So the credit, the debit that you have is to debit the contract liability. The contract liability at the end of the second year is 4,494,000. So now you did your performance obligation. You delivered the machine to the customer. So you need to close this contract liability. Contract liability was a credit in the balance sheet. In order to close it, so you are going to make it as a debit, and you are going to say debit by the full amount as end of the second year. And now here we need to recognize revenue, and revenue will be with the same value of the contract liability. So this is the accounting treatment if the customer is going to pay you in advance today.